Hi, all. Thanks so much for joining Speaking of Making Healthcare Work for You, Different Perspectives and Empowering Solutions. I'm Stephanie Fields, joined by my co-host, Dr. Apoorv Gupta, and today we are joined by Dr. Sanjiv Chopra, who is a professor of medicine at the Harvard Medical School, Marshall Wolf Master Clinician Educator at Brigham and Women's Hospital, co-director CME Division at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center.
Yeah, so I think the four biggest stories in medicine and biology right now are, one is artificial intelligence. I don't even call it artificial intelligence. I think it's aided intelligence, augmented intelligence. I mean, just imagine one can do colonoscopy, and if it incorporates AI, one encounters a polyp, and AI says, this is hyperplastic, leave it alone. No chance of malignancy, no need to biopsy, no need to remove, no need to have a $250 pathology fee. This is adenomatous, you got to remove it. Or you do upper endoscopy and somebody has Barrett's epithelium, which is a precancerous lesion for cancer of the esophagus. Incorporate AI and it will say, severe dysplasia, maybe carcinoma in situ, take 18 biopsies. Or it'll say no dysplasia, no need to take biopsies. Think of a radiologist who has seen 10,000 mammograms, and then on Monday morning, she or he is looking at more mammograms. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they didn't sleep that well last night. Maybe they had an extra glass of wine. We're going to make human errors. AI will not. So mammography, CAT scans, MRIs, ultrasounds, skin lesions. AI will look and say, atypical malignant melanoma, got to excise it, wide excision. So I think AI, and it's being incorporated at the Beth Israel Deaconess, Apoorv, a couple of our GI are doing some seminal work with endoscopy and incorporating AI. The second is microbiome, the second human genome, the 100 trillion bacteria in our gut. In aggregate, they weigh 3 pounds. Been called a newly discovered organ. I give a talk as a keynote around the country, Singapore, Kuwait, called Microbiome, Man and Medicine. And I have to update that talk like every 2 weeks. The most recent study, malignant melanoma, right? An awful skin condition. These patients got immunotherapy, a bunch responded, a bunch did not respond. 15 people had no response. They took the stool of a patient who had responded and gave it to these non-responders. 6 out of the 15 converted into responders. Fecal microbiota transplant. There's a study in 18 people with autism. They got a stool transplant. 2 years later, their microbiota has remained reverted, marked improvement in GI and CNS symptoms. There's a psychiatrist in Ireland, he's coined the term psychobiome, new revolution in psychiatry. So it has implications in obesity, arthritis, liver disease, cancer, our response to chemotherapy, our side effects to chemotherapy, dictated by our gut microbiome.
Can you change it without a transplant?
Huh?
Can you change it without a transplant? Is there a way?
Yeah, that's being done. Now people are studying not only these bacteria that are good and bad, but also what happens if you ingest them and what happens to gene expression. And they're coming up with companies. There's a company, disclaimer, I'm on their board. It's called Viome, started by Naveen Jain from Seattle. And what they do is they send you a kit and you give them a drop of blood, sample of your stool, and saliva. They study your microbiome, they study gene expression, and then they claim they personalize it. And they tell you, take these 2 probiotics, take these 2 supplements. Now the test would be, you just study the gut microbiome a month later, and all the good bacteria are thriving and the bad ones are suppressed. Whether we have come to this planet natural birth or C-section, it affects the microbiome. So people born by C-section are a little bit more likely to get autoimmune disorders, asthma, atopic dermatitis, Crohn's disease, lupus, rheumatoid. Not, it's significant, but slight increase. So there are two large-scale studies being done in our country, one in New York, one in Virginia. And what they're doing is kids born by C-section, taking permission from the mother, swab the vagina, the birth canal, and then rub it all over the face, skin, and in the mouth of the newborn. And preliminary studies show that a year later, these kids, their microbiome is similar to the microbiome of children born by vaginal delivery. In my slide, after I show this data, the title appears. It's called Bacterial Baptism. You got to make people laugh when you're talking about stool.
Amazing, yeah. Amazing how this stuff works. You never imagine that the stool,
it's huge. It's huge. So I said to the new dean at Harvard Medical School 2 years ago, and I said, Dr. Daly, you should start a microbiome center, microbiome man and medicine at Harvard. You've got 17 teaching affiliates, brilliant clinicians, brilliant base. He says, Sanjiv, funny you should mention it. Yesterday, I had a meeting with all the deans and department heads, and I asked them, do we have enough bandwidth to start a microbiome center? And they all chimed in yes. So anyway, microbiome, artificial intelligence. The third is CRISPR and gene editing. So this lady, Jennifer Doudna, when she was 10 years of age, she comes back from school. She was the oldest of 3 girls. The father doted on her, treated her more like a boy, and he puts a little book by James Watson, The Double Helix. So she reads it. Next day she goes to school and tells her chemistry teacher, I want to learn chemistry. This is our country. And this teacher says, Jennifer, chemistry is not for girls, it's for boys. 2020, she got the Nobel Prize in chemistry. Gene editing, it has implications in treating cancer, sickle cell anemia, unbelievable. It's going to be a multi-billion-dollar industry. Already funding is happening. And the fourth one, so microbiome, artificial intelligence, gene editing. And by the way, there's an amazing book by Walt Isaacson, who's a professor of history. And he's written a book and it's called Breaking the Code, The Code Breaker, Jennifer Doudna, Gene Editing and the Future of the Human Race. The title of the book, brilliantly written. So, and the fourth thing, believe it or not, is going to be the psychedelic revolution. So in the 50s and 60s, people were experimenting with LSD. People were thrown out of Harvard, Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert. And now it's seeing a resurgence. And it's because we can do functional MRI. We can study neuroplasticity, connection between neurons. And one of the big stories is ketamine, mushrooms, other things. But ketamine, just think of this. Preliminary research, 70% of people with refractory depression, right? Between 20 and 35 years of age, death from suicide is #1 cause around the world. So people with refractory depression, you put them on antidepressants, they get side effects, they don't respond. We do electroconvulsive therapy, transcranial magnetic stimulation, ketamine. Intravenous ketamine, 2 or 3 treatments. I know the story of a young guy who was severely depressed, got 3 or 4 treatments, tells his fiancée, I've hired the skating rink between 4 and 6 tomorrow morning. Come with your video and you're going to video me as skating. So she videos him. He sends it to some talent scouts. Next thing, he's playing for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Unbelievable. And now some people have come up with a ketamine lozenge. You put under your tongue, you're monitored by a nurse, a doctor, and you can do it in your home. So I think that's the next revolution.
I can't believe all of the range of topics we've covered. I'm just kind of amazed, and
Good.
it's like a 4-in-1 sort of a series. But Dr. Chopra, since unfortunately that our time today anyway has come to an
Yeah.
end, what I'd love to ask you is how you connect some of these ideas back to another one of your passions, which is leadership. So maybe you can give us
Yeah, I
some.
think in any of these endeavors, you will see people who are leading. And I was at a meeting between very senior people from the business school, medical school, Kennedy School of Government, Ed School, and it was to talk about leadership. And one of the guys said, and he is a very famous individual, Sanjiv, it's not possible to define leadership. You see leadership, you know it. I said, I respectfully disagree. Leadership is the ability to articulate a vision and walk the path such that it inspires others to rise above the banality and strife of their common day existence and achieve a higher and common goal. So we can all lead. There are many different principles of leadership. I wrote a book, Leadership by Example, and it spells out leadership: listening, empathy, attitude, dreaming big, effectiveness, being resilient, having a sense of purpose, having humility, and packing other people's parachute. But we need to lead by example, especially in healthcare. And I'll finish with a short story of Gandhi. He's sitting in his ashram, and this mother walks in with a 12-year-old son. She has walked 10 miles in the dust and heat from her village. She says, Gandhiji, my son adores you, he worships you. He'll do anything for you. Look at him. He's gained so much weight. He's eating a lot of sugar. Would you please tell him not to eat sugar? So Gandhi looks at the boy and the mother and he says, come back in a week. So they go away. A week later, they again come 10 miles in the dust and heat. Gandhi looks at the boy. He says, son, don't eat sugar. It's not good for your health. And the boy says, Gandhiji, from this moment onwards, I have given up sugar. And he leaves the room. Mother stays behind. She says to Gandhiji, thank you for saying that to my son. But can I ask you a question? He says, sure. We were here a week ago. You could have said the same thing to my son then. And Gandhi whispers into her ear, at that time, I had not given up sugar. Right? You have to lead by example. Not do as I say, do as I do. So I think the best thing we can do in healthcare and reaching out to our colleagues and patients is leading by example.
Well, on that note, my final question will be, what do you do personally to lead by example? What are the most important things that you feel you need to emulate to live that vision?
Integrity. Integrity, there's a wonderful book. If you haven't read it, I'd recommend Stephanie and Apurv, and for the attendees, listeners, it's called The Four Agreements. The Four Agreements We Make to Ourselves by Miguel Ruiz, based on Toltec ancient wisdom. On the cover, it's now endorsed by my brother, Deepak, but he was on Oprah twice. It was on New York Times bestseller list for 2 years. Sold, it's been translated into 50 languages. What are the four agreements? Number one, always be impeccable with your word, right? Number two, don't take things personally. Number three, don't be judgmental. We're all judgmental. I'm so, I go to a restaurant, I see some guy come and he's 300 pounds, he's clearly overweight. Next thing, he's ordering double cheeseburger and French fries. Who am I to be judgmental? Maybe his mother died yesterday. This is comfort food, or he got diagnosed with prostate cancer. And the fourth one, which also blew me away, always do your best. So I give 100 talks. I often get, storytelling and tugging at people's heart. I get standing ovations, and I became a little cocky. So I would go to the AV guy and say, okay, click, 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 click. Okay, I'm all set. Hello, am I doing my best? No. And now before I give a talk, I sit down 2 weeks before and go through each slide meticulously for an hour. How can I improve this? Improve the font, tell a different story, tell it differently. 4 agreements we make to ourselves. Very simple and yet so profound.
I love that. Thank you so much for this conversation. I feel like we covered a million topics and all of them are fascinating. Could be an hour on their own. I
Great.
appreciated your time. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Great to meet you, Stephanie. Apurv, great to see you. You're looking
Thank you.
like you looked 23 years ago.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Chopra. I'm gonna try to follow through on your advice of more vitamin D and coffee
Yeah,
and nuts.
yeah.
So thank you
Good,
so much.
good.
Really an honor.
All right. Be well. Thanks.
Thanks for
Bye
watching.
now.
Bye.
Bye bye.